Welcome to History Now the Future, the show where we take a sharp look at some of the most pressing issues of today, using history as our guide and the future as our destination. My name is Cory Bradford, and well, it's been a transformative week for American politics, to say the least. Last week, Donald J. Trump became the second person in U.S. history to win a non-consecutive second term as President of the United States. This is the first time we've seen something like this in over 130 years, as Grover Cleveland was our last non-consecutive two-term president back in the 1890s. Not particularly the outcome that most people who watch this podcast probably wanted to see, but it's also not particularly a surprising outcome, especially if you've been paying attention to the general mood of the country these last few months. Now, in the aftermath of Trump's resounding victory, many Democrats are trying to figure out just how did this happen and where did it all go wrong? Of course, some of them are blaming the state of the economy. Others blame President Joe Biden, claiming that if he had dropped out sooner, perhaps the Democrats could have had a proper primary and got a better candidate than Kamala Harris on the ticket. People are also blaming Harris herself, claiming she ran a poor campaign and that the American people never really got to know what she actually stood for. Some are even blaming Tim Walz, because fuck it, let's put it all on the Veep. That's what people are really voting for, right? I mean, we all remember how instrumental Dan Quayle was to the first George Bush administration. And of course, a lot of political commentators who never seem to get anything right until after the fact are blaming the Democrats' failures on wokeness. Now, for the life of me, I still can't find a comprehensive definition for this term, woke. The original term goes back to the 1930s, when Black Americans would use it to warn other Black Americans. They would say things like, hey, stay woke in this county over here because it's a sundown county, and they kill Black folks at night over there. But in the last 8 years or so, the term has been co-opted first by the American left to refer to pretty much any of their social justice stances, and then the word was stolen by conservatives to define basically anything that pisses them off. It seems like anything deemed as unconventional to conservative values could be considered woke. Having a gay person be the star of your TV show could be too woke. Having a woman on the presidential ticket could be too woke. Having a Black person cast in a Disney movie could also be considered too woke. It just sounds like this has become a catch-all term to describe anything that upsets the average white conservative. That being said, were the Democrats even that woke during this election cycle? Comedian Jon Stewart did an incredible piece on this on The Daily Show a couple of days ago. I encourage you all to go watch it. And in that segment, Stewart shows campaign ads from Democrats running in some of the most competitive House and Senate races. And the majority of these Democrats are just trying to sound as much like Republicans as possible. They weren't actually being woke. In fact, they were trying to reject the notion that they were too woke. And this is where a lot of you Democrats actually fucked up. Think about it. If you're a true progressive and you see a commercial from some Democrat trying to sound like a Republican, you're not gonna vote for them because they no longer represent your values. And if you're a conservative and you see some Democrat doing that, well, you're just gonna laugh and think, why would I vote for a Democrat who's trying to sound like a Republican when I can just vote for the Republican? That's like being in the early 90s and buying the Color Me Bad CD when you could just get the Boys to Men CD. I mean, it's right there and it's for the same price. Democrats were basically on the defense this entire election, constantly trying to prove that they weren't the thing Republicans were painting them as. Meanwhile, Republicans controlled the narrative and the conversation, and they also controlled the image of their opposition. And Democrats fell for this bait hook, line, and sinker. Dems simultaneously alienated true progressives while trying to court conservatives who were never going to vote for them no matter what. And the numbers actually prove this. In 2020, Joe Biden got over 81 million votes for president. In 2024, Kamala Harris got around 72 million votes. That means around 9 million people who voted for Joe Biden didn't vote for Kamala Harris. And the vast majority of that 9 million didn't go over to the right and vote for Donald Trump. Most of them sat this election out because the system made them choose between center-right Dems and far-right Republicans. And they didn't want to vote for any of that. Now, in the wake of this backlash on woke, I'm already seeing so many commentators and influencers who have been pushing left-wing notions for years now already abandoning those principles, saying things like, I can see why young white men are so angry in this country, and maybe we should just let the government decide what women can do with their own bodies. Let's be honest. If you're talking like that, you were probably never in favor of a lot of these woke principles to begin with. You were just following the crowd on social media. You followed the crowd in 2020 during the George Floyd protest and the Black Lives Matter movement. You followed the crowd in the past year with all of this outrage about Gaza and Palestine. And now that Trump won the election, you're following the crowd again, doing whatever is most popular, because a lot of you are mostly uninformed about politics and policy, and you lack the ability to think for yourselves. Democrats are now asking the $10 million question. What can they do to change things for their party, and how can they ensure a better outcome when it comes to the presidential election of 2028? And if you're asking that question, you have already failed. Because Democrats need to stop being so concerned with the next election and start learning how to govern right now. Think about Republicans. When Trump lost in 2020, did they run to the left? Did they suddenly become more liberal? Heck no. They doubled down and became even more conservative. And even though they didn't have the White House for the last 4 years, a great deal of their agenda has been getting pushed and passed successfully, especially at the state level. Ultra-conservative governors like Abbott in Texas and DeSantis in Florida have been turning their states into far-right havens. The real question is, what will blue states and Democrats do to protect their citizens from Trump's more aggressive policies? Because Trump has already shown us he's going for the jugular this time. Since winning the election, he's promised to attack colleges still engaging in DEI programs, threatening to take their funding away and give that money to white victims of diversity programs. You cannot make this shit up. He has also promised to abolish the Department of Education, which is actually going to hurt low-income students in red states more than anything else. And Robert F. Kennedy, the man whose vaccine misinformation once killed over 70 people in the American Samoan Islands, is going to be a top public health official. We've completed the fuck around stage. The find out stage has just begun. And posterity will judge us all by how we reacted in the face of peer extremism. Now, we have a great show for you all today. We're going to be teaching some political explanations regarding the two-party system in this country, and we're going to take a look at the international reaction to Trump's win. But first things first, it's time for Trending Down. Welcome to Trending Down, a segment where we take a look at some of the more trivial topics floating around the internet in the past week. And the Grammys just released their nominations for the music of 2024. And I don't think most of us really care, but people are noticing that Beyoncé got the lion's share of the nominations this year. In fact, with this year's nominations, Beyoncé became the most nominated artist in Grammy Award history. And her album, Cowboy Carter, has become the most nominated album in Grammy Award history. Gee, who could have seen that coming? Now, Beyoncé's Cowboy Carter was her genre-bending effort at creating a country music album. However, the album was largely ignored by actual country music fans. In fact, Cowboy Carter received 0 nominations and absolutely no recognition from the CMAs, the top country music award show. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Beyoncé doesn't really fit into traditional country music culture. And unlike what a lot of people are saying, it's not because she's black. For example, Shaboozey, a new black artist that came out with a country song anthem based on an old 2004 rap song called Tipsy, was heavily accepted by the country music community, and he will be performing at the CMAs. So it's not necessarily a race thing. It's just that Beyoncé's politics and social views clash heavily with most of country music's culture, and perhaps the reason why the Grammys gave her so many nominations was because her album Cowboy Carter was largely ignored by country music's biggest establishments. Either way, Beyonce has recently become such a polarizing figure for reasons that I can't fully understand. You either think she's incredible and one of the best musical acts of the last 30 years, or you think she's literally the devil and a part of some weird cult that eats children. And there doesn't really seem to be any middle ground here. Personally, I think Beyonce is a very talented artist whose work has just been oversaturated by the media. I feel like she's been pushed on us so much for the last 15 or 20 years now that we've kind of just grown tired of her, unless you're a diehard fan. Yet and still, the unfounded rumors and accusations about Beyonce and her husband Jay-Z baffle me. Almost as much as consumers were baffled when they took home Wicked dolls for their children and found out that the packaging for the dolls led to a very wicked website. The toy company Mattel recently released dolls based on the new movie Wicked that stars Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. The dolls were meant to promote the movie that is based on the popular musical Wicked. Now, on the back of the packaging the dolls came in, there was a link to a website. It seemed like a fitting website, as it just said www.wicked.com. However, the official website for this movie is www.wickedmovie.com. That's because the wicked.com domain is already owned by a pornographic production company. So yeah, a link to a porn site was on the back of dolls being sold to children. Come on, guys. Now, Mattel says that this is just an awful oversight and a terrible mistake. They have pulled the dolls from shelves. You can't even buy them online right now. And it will probably be a hugely expensive effort to get these things back in stores before Christmas. And even by then, this has completely ruined the merchandise campaign for this movie. But personally, I don't know if this was just a mistake. One of two things is happening here. Either someone just wasn't doing their job and didn't make sure the right website link was approved to be printed on these boxes, which to me feels like way too big of a mistake to actually happen by accident, or someone at some stage in the process here deliberately put that website on these boxes to ruin the overall rollout of this movie. I say that because this movie has been suffering from a large amount of backlash simply because of its casting. Some people don't believe that a black woman should have been chosen to play the character of the main witch in this movie, even though, going all the way back to The Wizard of Oz, which inspired the source material for this movie, the character of that witch had green skin. So why the hell does the ethnicity or race of the person under the green skin even matter? And yet this movie has been getting review bombed and trolled online by a bunch of racist tools who have never even set foot on Broadway to see the musical Wicked, one, because they could never afford it, and two, because they have no interest in musicals. And isn't this coming from the group that says everyone else gets too offended by everything these days? Bro, you got triggered by a green woman in a musical mostly made for children. Take your own advice and fucking chill, man. So one of the things that a lot of my younger followers want me to do is make more videos explaining politics and the American political system on a very objective and analytical level. So that's what this new segment is going to be about. We're going to talk about the different bases for both of the major political parties in the US, the Republican base and the Democratic base. And we're going to explain why it is so much more difficult for Democrats to win nationwide elections due to the very makeup of their base. Now, when it comes to the Republican Party, their base largely coalesces around ideology. If you share a certain set of conservative beliefs and values, then you can be a part of that base. Now, granted, some of those values do lean towards a sort of white nationalism and a sort of Christian nationalism. However, you can be black or Latino and still be a Republican if you believe in the values that that party believes in. Lindsey Graham, U.S. Senator out of South Carolina, once said, you can move to South Carolina and be black or Hispanic or whatever, but you gotta be conservative. Now, we can unpack how problematic it is for a United States Senator to tell people, don't even move to my state if you're not aligned with my political beliefs. But what he said really does describe the way the Republican Party currently thinks. Now, if you are a minority racially, or religiously speaking, you will probably have to take a back seat when it comes to the concerns and agenda of the Republican Party. But again, if you're okay with that, then the party will largely accept you as a member, but not as a leader, as Ann Coulter. Now, the Democratic Party is more of a loose association of different identity groups. These groups may be racial or religious groups. Some of these groups may be based on income, things like sexual orientation, or even gender. But all of these groups have one thing in common. They all believe that for whatever reason, they cannot get proper political representation from the Republican Party, either because they feel like their group is being ignored by the Republican Party, or they feel like their group is actively being threatened by the Republican Party. So these groups have entered into a reluctant alliance with one another in order to gain representation. Historically, this is how the Democratic Party has been for over a century. Back in the 19th century, Catholics in the North largely started supporting the Democratic Party, while down south, extremely racist Southerners also supported the Democratic Party due to their hatred of the Republican Party and its policies that helped end slavery. But these Southerners weren't just racist against African Americans. The KKK also targeted Catholics. So Northern Catholics and anti-Catholic Southerners both supported the same political party, largely due to regional concerns and because both groups felt it would be beneficial for them to do so. Now, therein lies the Democratic Party's key problem. It has all these different groups, including many that clash with one another, and it has to cater to all of them in order to win elections. Think about all the different groups that tend to vote Democratic today. African Americans, Latinos, although this election has seen that change a bit, LGBT individuals, women who actually care about their rights, young people, all of these groups largely support the Democratic Party. But what happens when two groups within the party clash heavily? Take Jewish people and Muslims, for example. Both of these groups have long supported the Democratic Party. But in the past year, I can't think of two groups that have been more at odds with each other than those two. And that division caused a major rift in the party that ultimately cost the Democratic Party the state of Michigan in the 2024 presidential election. Meanwhile, the Republicans are thriving right now, primarily because they don't have to appeal to a bunch of different identity groups. They only have to appeal to one unifying ideology. Now, the Democrats can't abandon the groups who support them the most. But if they're going to be successful, they must forge a unified ideology that all of the members of their base can get behind. And that's much easier said than actually done. Now let's take a look at the international responses to Trump's win in less than 90 seconds. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claims that Trump's win will offer a new beginning for America and a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and the United States. He also claims that Trump's win was a huge victory, probably a huge victory for him. So for all of you who refuse to vote for Kamala Harris because of the Biden administration's relationship with Israel, well, it looks like you just helped elect a leader that was even more pro-Israel. So congrats on that. We'll see how all of that goes. Russian leader Vladimir Putin has also congratulated Trump on his election win, claiming that he thought Trump behaved quite bravely after taking that assassination attempt to the ear. However, Vladimir Putin has said that he doesn't know what will happen between him and a second Trump administration, claiming that he has no idea how things will go considering the whole Ukrainian war. That's not as promising as we thought it would be. And China's President Xi Jinping congratulated Trump on his presidential win as well. He said that China will respect America's choice, and he urged both nations to find the right way to get along. All right, I want to thank you all for watching another episode of History Now the Future. There is not going to be a Thursday interview episode this week. We're still trying to get some more great guests lined up for the show. We have a couple of interviews banked, but we're still working on the editing for all of that. Also, we are still going to retool the podcast a little bit pretty soon. You're going to be seeing some different correspondents coming on here to do different segments with me. We're going to expand our conversations to talk more about pop culture, sports, just different things like that. So it's not just all political, doom and gloom all the time. Although we will still be reporting on all of the, let's just say, chaos that we can expect from this upcoming second Trump administration. But I want to thank you all for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the page so you never miss an episode. We'll see you guys next time.